Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Pages podcast. This is the fourth episode and a particularly exciting one. I mean, they're all exciting to me, but this one is particularly exciting because it's with R.J. Walraven, and this is someone who I've read her book, and we're going to talk about that on the podcast. But she's also read mine, so we had a great conversation about it. And we actually met through a bit of a chance meeting, actually. So yeah, this is a particularly exciting one. We had a great chat about where this came from because her story is heavily based on true events, so prepare yourself and strap yourself in for a good, jolly good old chat. Thank you. There we go, perfect. So thank you very much for joining me. So today I'm with Janet Walraven, and I'm glad we've cleared that up now and how it's pronounced. That's fabulous. And I'm really excited to chat to you today, and I've got quite a few questions for you around your novel and all the rest of it. Now, before I start plowing these at you and getting all these amazing answers out, tell me a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? Where do you live? What does all that look like for you?
I was born in Kansas, but I've moved 79 times. So I've lived all over the United States. My dad built grain elevators, cement plants, the tanks for Busch Gardens Brewery. We moved all over the place. So I don't know where I'm from. So now I live in New Mexico, the land of enchantment. And we're having a beautiful, cool, sunshiny day. So I'm a 35-year retired teacher, K-12, but mostly junior high and high school. What else do you want to know?
Perfect. That's a perfect and what a noble career
Okay.
as well. 35 years in teaching as well. And those people that I speak to that are teachers, they absolutely love doing it. It's a great passion of theirs and that sort of thing. Is that how you feel about it as well?
I absolutely loved teaching. I'm glad I did it. I wish I had other lifetimes because there are other things I'd like to do. But I loved teaching. I miss my kids, although I'm on Facebook, and actually a couple of them just came and visited me the last few days from 30 years ago. And so yeah, it was a hard go. I don't know if I showed you my other book.
Yeah.
I wrote a mentor teaching book just because I wanted to help teachers who were having a hard time. And it took me a while, 7 years actually, to say, okay, now I feel like I know how to do this. But it was a hard go because I had nobody mentoring me. So when I retired, I thought, I want to help teachers either learn how to do it with joy or get out of it and do something else. So that's
absolutely. So, and what's the title of that book? Because I know you've shown it me there, but this will all be audio only. They won't see that. So, Connect for Class. Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. It's Connect for Classroom Success, a mentoring guide.
Fabulous. For teachers. So you're saying there with teachers that are struggling with what in particular?
Mostly classroom management. There's this term called classroom control, how to control your classroom. That term should go away because it's a matter of truly connecting with each individual student and learning how to manage, whether it's the discipline or the curriculum or your colleagues, your administrator, your janitor, the cafeteria. It's all in there about how do you connect with each person. That's so important to help mold this child in the right direction. So that's what it's about. And it's all mostly true scenarios of things that actually happen in the classroom. So rather than telling like a textbook would, I'm showing them exactly through dialogue how I handled it.
I think that's such a great point as well, because if I look back to when I was in school, I didn't particularly enjoy school, but there were a few teachers there who they did just what you're talking about there. They connected with you. There was and I think a lot of that was down to that they were very passionate. There was a lot of teachers in my school specifically. Now, of course, I'm not a teacher or anything like that, so I'm very limited on what I can talk about here on this point. But there were teachers that were at my school where I think once upon a time they were really, really invested in what they used to do, but there was some people who just worn down and they were just kind of going through the motions. They'd lost their je de vie, if you will. Yeah, absolutely. It kind of gone, and they were kind of just ticking the boxes to to go, and of course they don't connect with anybody on that level. Well, no, I get that totally. I think that's a fabulous one. So that's great. And so you did this one first, you did that one, and then of course you wrote, and the book I'm really excited to talk to you about because I've read Rainbow of Promise. So my first question around Rainbow of Promise. Rainbow of Promise is a World War II romance novel, which historical novel. Perfect. Novel. They're much more accurate than what I just said. So yeah, perfect. Now, in terms of Rainbow of Promise, the first question I've got with you around this is, and I have to be careful here. I don't want to give anyone any spoilers because I know I've read it, and I don't want to give anything away because it is a great read. But in terms of the book, what was the point that you got to? What was the tipping point for you to go, right, I'm going to put pen to paper, I'm going to write this? What was that? When did that happen?
I miss my parents, and they had such an amazing relationship. I don't, because we moved around a lot. They were such an amazing team. I have to give my mother a whole lot of credit for, she thought moving around was a great adventure. And she loved going to the new place, the new culture, the new whatever, and just embraced it. And my dad was the superintendent of the team who was whether they were building a grain elevator or whatever. He was the superintendent, and later on he became a vice president of his company. And it was a good choice, their coming together. And when I looked, and my mother was such a good storyteller, she told me story after story after story of their first relationship, and then just stories that happened. And I thought, I really wanted to do this for me. I wanted to make it a tribute to them and their excellent chemistry and love story. And also, after my dad passed, we found his World War II diary. And I thought, I really need to do something with this. And I did a lot of research, and I actually ran across someone who was in his battalion who had kept a diary and put it online. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is incredible. The other side of it is that I taught for 25 years. In my teaching, I taught the Holocaust. So I was very into the research of World War II. And then I had this diary of my dad, and I thought, my family needs to know this. My family needs to know the story of my parents and what they went through. And that propelled me a lot because I felt like it was a legacy that I was handing down to my siblings, my nieces and nephews. And so that motivated me. And what further motivated me was once I got into it, it was such a joy to be in their heads. And I because I missed them terribly, and I thought I got to be, every time I was sitting there writing another chapter of the story, I thought I get to be there and hear their conversations and know what they would say to each other in this particular moment. So yes, it is historical fiction, but everything in there is as true as I could get it. So I loved it. And when I kind of went into a post-depression when I was done, because I thought, I got to do something else to get back in their heads. So it was a joy to write. I hope people will find Fabulous. It a joy to read.
And I absolutely, if they're going to take anything from it as much as I did, they definitely will do. You hit on a really important point there, which is, and I've mentioned this in the previous podcasts that I've done, I don't want to seem like I'm laboring this point too much, but when people say to me about, kind of rules for writing, or, for people who are preparing to do a book, that sort of thing, I think writing for you is one of the biggest things, because that's what I did with my book. I mean, I know yours is based on a true story, of course, you've got that family relation, mine's complete fiction, but you've got to write it so that you enjoy it. Because my rule always is, and my advice to anyone is, whatever you write, you've got to love it. And if you don't love it, you can't expect anyone else to. And that's kind of how I feel about that. But
yes,
no, you're hitting a great point.
I agree with you.
It's a great point. Now, just to give extra context to those that are listening to this, so it's a historical fiction novel, and it's based in the World War II era, and it touches on a point for me, because there's lots of books about World War II, there's lots of books about historical side and true stories.
Yes.
But what's fabulous about yours and the extra insight that you get is what it was like at home during that time. There's not too much about that, and I love that insight into seeing, this did, because this is the real struggle that these people, that your parents went through, and of course the other people involved in that story as well, what they went through, the struggles, the shortages, the moving around, the uncertainty. That was such a big part of it. They didn't know what was going to happen. Are we going to get called up? Am I going to get sent away next week? We don't know. We've just got to kind of wait and see with a lot of stuff. So yeah, it's a fabulous insight. And what I love about it as well is that the book is paced very well. It's not predictable. One of the worst things for me personally, I'm giving a lot of personal opinions on this one today, but one of the things that I can't stand is a book that's predictable. If I know where it's going before I've got there, it drives me crazy. So yeah, it's a fabulous insight into what's gone on. And I find that interesting as well, that after your father passed, you found the diary as well. With my family, so with my family who served in the Second World War, when they came home from the Second World War, that was it. It was done. Nobody talked about it ever. It was just put away, and life continued. And that was very much. And so was that reciprocated over with your family as well? Was that kind of how your parents were about it once it had passed? It was like, okay, we're not going to talk about that too much anymore. We're just going to get on with life. How did that work out?
Well, I wished I had sat down with my dad and asked a whole lot more questions, but he didn't readily talk about it. It's exactly what you said. They came home and were ready to move on. It was a new life. But my mother once in a while would say, oh, I'd love to go to Paris. My dad's response was, why would you want to go where there are bombed out buildings and stairways going nowhere? Wow. And that was his response. And my mother never went. Really, he never went back.
Statement, though, isn't it?
To Europe.
Yeah.
Yes. And I remember just as I was probably 8 years old the first time I heard him say that. And I thought, well, my mother wants to go to Paris. But, I went back to Europe, in Normandy, where he had been. And he was a little late going into the European theater. But when I went back, it was like there was an old part of the city and a new part of the city. And I went to the old part and I walked streets that I thought, I want to walk where he has been. But what I saw was new apartment building next to a still crumbled apartment building, stairways going nowhere.
Wow.
And it was like being back there. And then I understood, I thought, I understand why he didn't want to go back. And so I don't know if I'm answering your question.
You absolutely answered it, actually, because it kind of segued really nicely into what we were saying there about, your father's attitude towards the war and not talking about it and that sort of thing. But I kind of get that. And it was, it's quite clear. And when you read Rainbow of Promise, that it comes across that he would be that sort of person to go and not in a negative way, but in an optimistic, let's be positive about the future way. It's like, okay, well, that part's done. Let's get on with what we need to get on with. Let's get on with life and enjoying the company of those that you want to be around. And I think that's fabulous.
Yes, that is exactly what he was like. Yeah, and my mother too. Always moving forward, and both were. We're happy to do that. They were grateful. I think part of that comes from having been through the Depression. They went through the Depression. Right at the end of the Depression was the World War II, when they became young adults. They were grateful for everything. They never complained about life. They just moved on. And my mother had this saying of, no matter what was going on or I was griping about something, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I didn't know what bootstraps were, but I knew what she meant. And that has, encouraged me and haunted me all my life. I don't dare complain, because pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Absolutely. But I really like that attitude. It's a great way to have it. And I know with it's just that kind of pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and get on with it. We can, we can only work within the realms of what is possible. Let's get on and crack on with it. I absolutely love it. One of the things that really struck me as well with the structure of your novel and the way you put it together, and it was what really brought it to life for me. So let me add some context to this for you. So I tend to read about 3 or 4 books at the same time. What I do is I might have an audio book that I listen to in the car when I'm driving to work or whatever. I'll have one on my Kindle next to my bed, and I'll read that one in bed. I'll have another one in the kitchen so that when I finish cleaning, I'll have a quick read of that. And I have another one at work on my desk as well, which will usually be a non-fiction book of some sort. So I read quite a few at the same time. Now, your book was my relaxed, I'm going to enjoy reading that, and it's on my Kindle, and I read that in bed. Now, going back to the structure of your novel, right in the middle of it, in the middle of the novel, you put pictures in, and they bring everything to life. I was blown away by it. The car that's talked about, the motorcycle that's talked about, your parents being in it. All of a sudden, even though I knew it was based on a true events that had actually happened, it was like, wow, no, these were real people. They actually went and did this, and my girlfriend was with me. I was like, wake up. You'll need to see these pictures. It's amazing. It brings it all to life. I absolutely loved that. I thought it was a great, very, very structurally a really clever thing to do, because then you've kind of got that. It kind of re-excites you for the next half of the book, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. So that was really, really good. So one of the questions that I want to ask you, and I'm careful now not to give any spoilers. So there's a character in your book referred to a couple of times as the boy that your mother wanted to get a bicycle for. And one of the big question marks when I'd finished the book was, what became of the boy? How did he get on? And how did that evolve into your parents' life and, of course, your life? And I'm really interested in that part.
Let me see. How do I answer this
without spoiling?
Be careful. He did become a part of our lives on and off. And as I got older, I wanted that. So that became more familiar and more intense, and I made an effort to do that. So does that answer your question without my saying?
It just adds that extra bit of happiness to it, because when it kind of came to an end, I was like, oh, there's still this big question mark here of, this child in the book. So I was really
Actually, I had a friend call me just last week, and he said, he just read the book, and he said, I have to ask you. And he asked me the same question.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, it's lovely that, still involved with everything. And I'm not going to talk any more about that out of fear of spoiling it for anyone else.
Okay.
But no, that's an excellent part. So the next part that I want to ask you about as well, chat to you about, is I'm always interested in culture, people's history, where they come from, and America overall is thick with it. It's thick with backgrounds from many different places, Europe and all over the place. So it's a great place for that. And what was mentioned is your history with vulgar Germans. I love this because I don't think the vulgar Germans get the airtime that they deserve, in my opinion. I think that it's such an interesting, because of course, you've got them where they historically moved to a particular area, and I think during wartime that could have been really difficult for those that stayed there, because you've got the Germans where it's like, well, you're not really German anymore, and then you've got Russians where not really Russian either. So it's this kind of this place where you maybe they're a bit of an identity crisis for those that stayed there, but of course, your mother didn't, move to America and whatnot. So your grandmother even moved to America and whatnot. I love all that. I think that's a fabulous bit of the book, and the insight into that your cultural background around that. I think that's fabulous. So my question for you around that is, what kind of is there anything that still is in your life from that cultural background, if that makes sense? So any particular things in your life that you still keep from that?
Well, yes, German food. That has a little bit of a switch because there's a Russian influence on that German food. And I've had readers encourage me, they want the prequel about my grandmother and grandfather in Russia and coming to America. So I started doing research on that, and I was shocked to find out what the reality of it was, rather than just the stories I had heard and what I had seen, what I imagined. And as I was researching it, I thought, oh my goodness, this is so intriguing. And it really has propelled me to want to write the prequel to the story. And the sad part that I remember as a child, my grandmother talking about, she wrote back and forth to her family and her friends in Kuta, Russia, while after she was in America. But there came a time, it was right during Stalin's time, when she got no more letters. And the assumption was then that they were all sent to Siberia. And then I found out even later on that some people had fled from there back to Germany. So it's kind of a, it's a sadness in that part of the story of what was happening all during that time. But for culture, I grew up hearing all of my relatives speaking German. They spoke German all the time when they were together. And so that has had some influence on my life and just understanding that part of it. I wish I'd learned it, but my mother spoke German until she went to first grade in a one-room schoolhouse. And when that was not a popular thing right after World War I. And going into, and she decided, I'm not saying another word till I lose this accent. Whether or not she followed through on that, I doubt it. But that was her thinking, was that I can't be German and be accepted. So it was difficult, but she was a stellar student and overcame that. And none of my relatives speak with an accent, but my grandmother spoke Russian, German, and English. My grandfather was conscripted into the army in Russia, but he was to serve in Poland as an interpreter because he spoke 6 languages. Now, how that came about, how did my grandfather learn 6 languages? I don't know that part, but in doing the research, of course, he spoke German, Russian. How they learned English, I don't know. But in doing my research, there was a French group of people who were also there in a town right next to it. So he did learn that, and of course, and he knew Polish for some reason. I don't know, but I always delighted in thinking that, wow, he must have been fairly intelligent to know 6 languages. But then he went AWOL and came to America. So that it was quite a interesting story of all my relatives and where they've come from and what they became.
Definitely, it's a fabulous history, and I think, in terms of a prequel, I'd be really keen to read that for sure, because of the parts that involve your grandmother in there. It comes across very plainly that she was a person who had lived a life and clearly was extremely resilient and quite gritty and tough. There's not much to get that lady down.
Absolutely.
And
you really got her.
Yeah. And I think it's a fabulous sign of the times for me. And I think that cultural background really facilitates that. And that's why I was so keen to talk to you about that, the Volga German side as well, because I find that fabulously interesting. So, no, I'm absolutely with you. You should definitely do a prequel for it. I'd be well game for that. Yeah.
Okay, I'll work on it. I got 2 other books going right now, so maybe that'll be my third one.
Definitely, perfect. So, well, in that case, then that segues us nicely into what are the other 2 works that you've got in the works just now?
Now, well, I'll show you a little.
Oh, right, let's have a look.
Piece. I'm writing a children's book, which it's about 2 little hedgehogs that go to the Louvre, sneak into the Louvre in Paris, and find their way around. And there's a special story that goes with that. That's kind of a tribute to my uncle. I'll show you this, but people can't see it. But here's Brilliant. 2 little hedgehogs.
Oh, yes.
Can you see that? two little hedgehogs among the feet of the people looking at the Mona Lisa.
Fabulous. I love it.
But it's Hector and Heloise at the Louvre in Paris. And I'm actually getting ready to get that formatted and done this week. So my other one is, I had a student in 8th grade who, you know how when you look into a camera, the camera sees the image upside down, but then when you click it, it turns it. Your brain does the same thing. I had this student, and this is a simplistic way of describing it, even though it's not very scientific. I had a student in 8th grade who had been considered, quote, which is not a nice thing to say now, mentally retarded. He was in special ed. He came to me in my classroom because he'd been bullied a lot, and the parents wanted him in a safe place. Well, it just took a few days before I saw this kid, and I thought, this kid is brilliant, but he's not mentally retarded. He's brilliant. But I long story short, I had to find out how to help this kid because I knew he wasn't mentally retarded. And so I did. So that's what I'm writing the book about.
I love that. That's great. And that's what it's all about. It's all about embracing what we're good at, isn't it? Everyone's good at different things. And sometimes if people can't see that, I'm glad that the badging of, people being mentally retarded and whatnot, is to be, it is getting knocked on the head, which is great because it's just about celebrating our differences as people. That's great. That's a great reason to write the book. Fantastic. And what's the other book? What's book number 2 that you've got in the works? Oh, sorry.
That is the second one. The first one is the children's book, and then I'm doing both of them at the same time. So I'm almost finished with the second one too. So I also want to do an anthology of short stories and poetry.
Wow, you've got quite a list going on. It's excellent.
Yeah, I got to get all this out of my head. I mean, I think, oh, here's another one. Here, I need to do this, like the prequel. I thought, okay, I need another lifetime because I've got all this stuff in my head I want to get out on paper. And I have friends who are writers who really do want to become rich and famous from writing. And I don't care. I love sitting at the computer and just letting it flow out. And that's what brings me joy. And if people read it and buy the books, I'm grateful, and I think it's wonderful. But if they don't, was the joy of writing.
I know. I'm with you on that, and that is a fantastic mindset to have. The thing is, you can write the perfect novel for a perfect genre. You won't please everybody. It's not a possible thing to do, and I'm quite with you on that. It's the same with my works. If someone reads it and they like it, that's wonderful. If you read it and you don't like it, that's fine as well. There's no problem at all. And I get completely where you're coming from. There is a joy in it. I mentioned this in one of my other podcasts, and this will bring us into kind of our final point, really, around writing, because one of the audiences that I'm kind of targeting with this podcast are those that are looking to, so they've got a great idea, but they haven't put pen to paper yet, and they're not sure about how to do that and what that involves, that kind of thing. So in terms of writing a book, getting ready, getting that mindset, that sort of thing, in terms of your process for writing, what does that look like for you? Do you have a particular process of how you do it, or do you just literally get a pen, paper, and just let it go, and then that's it?
Well, I start with whatever story is in my head, which may not be the beginning or the middle or the end. It's just whatever strikes me first to get it down in writing. And I find that when I get in that zone, that it just comes. And I on a lot of author sites where people talk about, what do I do about writer's block? I've never had writer's block. When I sit down, put my fingers on the keys, and I write by computer. I type very, very fast, and I can't get, if I'm using pen and paper or pencil and paper, which a lot of people, I have a friend who loves the feeling of the pencil on the pad. And I thought, go for it. That's the way you like to do it. But I can't get the ideas out fast enough if I'm handwriting. So whatever story, and when I did the book, I wrote this story, that story, this connection, and then decided how am I going to, or organize it, and how am I going to make it flow. And that was, as you know, hundreds of hours of editing, hundreds of hours of switching around, changing, transitions, segueing, whatever, to make it from beginning to end. And where did I want to start, and where did I want to end? And I was an English teacher, basically. And you're supposed to teach outlining. So I taught outlining, but then gave all my junior, especially junior high and high school kids, if you don't like outlining, don't worry about it. Don't do it. I can't do outlining for a book. But I did find that I had to sit down and make a timetable for when my dad was here and when he was there and what happened in between. And I got very messed up. I had a whole 9 months of, wait a minute, this doesn't work. So I had to step back and go over that very carefully, month by month, to say, I've got to make this work, because there was a kind of a time lapse. And I thought, what happened during that time? So then I had to stop and kind of reconnoiter and get it in there. And it's hard work, as you know, writing is hard work.
Oh, yeah. That a lot of people. So yeah. For me, the fun bit is where you're saying they're blurting out the ideas and assembling that and putting it all together. For me, that's the fun bit. A lot of people say that editing is fun. For me, no, I hated every second of it. The editing was the tough bit. You know, yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, I'd say if anyone is, you know, looking to venture out and start writing a book, whatever it's about, it's definitely not something that's easy, but there's a lot of joy to be found in it, and it is immensely rewarding once you've finished it, and you've put it together, and you've got this in, you know, this story put together, and then of course it's something that you love as well. You know, you get to the end of it and go, wow, I like this, you know, and that's what it's all about, isn't it? But yeah, perfect. So I think that really ties everything up. I've gone through everything that I was going to ask you, and I like, as I was saying before we started recording this, I've been really excited for this one, to ask you these questions around your book. And for anyone who's interested in checking out Rainbow of Promise, there will be links to our Janet Walraven's work on my website. So if you go to bookcream.co.uk, it'll all be on there. There'll be links underneath this video. Definitely check it out. Absolutely. Wonderful. So thank you very, very much for entertaining me and joining me on this podcast and answering all my inane questions that I've been firing at.
It's been wonderful to meet you in person, sort of. And I love talking about it. So I thank you so much, and thank you for promoting my book. I appreciate that very much.
Pleasure. And like I say, anyone who's listened to this, all of the details will be on the website. You can check that out. You'll be able to see the links to Amazon as well. And if you do read it, definitely leave a review as well. We're all about reviews.
Yes, I very much appreciate that.
Well, perfect. Well, thank you very, very much for joining me.
Oh, well, I hope I see you again. I'll let you know when my next book is done. I want to be one of the
first people to find out.
Okay. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it, Grant.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. Just before you go, just before you crack on with your day, one quick question for you. Do you hate boring stories and boring novels? Me too. There's nothing worse than a predictable, linear, flat plot line with no real character development in it. It's a nightmare. Anyway, if you're not into that, and if you are into real emotional attachment to characters, a thick plot that you can't predict, you don't know where it's going, something that's layered, and it will leave you with something once you've finished it, a bit of fantasy in there, a bit of magic in there, a bit of time travel, a bit of sci-fi. It hops across genres quite nicely, pretty timeless. You could even drop in a bit of historical fiction in there. Definitely check out The Commodore and the Matterless Martyr. Head over to bookcream.co.uk. Pop that into your browser, on your phone. There's links on this as well to check it out. But honestly, check it out. Click onto Amazon. You can even have a quick sample for free. You can check it out, the first bit, for free, for nothing. That's crazy, isn't it? Make sure you jump on there and check it out and enjoy. It's on Kindle Unlimited at the minute as well. Thank you.